I want to talk a little bit about Israel, and more than talk, I want to listen because initially, when Rabbi Josh asked me to speak today, I said I'm not ready to speak. I'm not ready to come and teach as if everything is normal, and in Israel, it's not. I want to make that absolutely clear. Although thank God my mom is fine. By fine, she means we didn't have sirens for 24 hours. So if that's a measure of fines, like there were sirens for 24 hours. Clearly, things are not fine. And I know that in America, because of the 24-hour news cycle, and because we just selected a new speaker to the House, and because life just go on, and obviously, the talk show hosts are making funny jokes again, and and olam k'minhago noheg, the world is continuing to revolve around its acts. But that's not the situation in Israel. In Israel, literally everything stopped 3 weeks ago on Shabbat at 6:30 in the morning, and since then nothing regained normalcy. I think that to a large extent, many Israelis, including the Israeli government, is still in shock of what happened, and not even fully comprehending what was going on. Just one item of information out of the ocean, it's not even sea, it's ocean of information, is that currently the tally for the kidnapped and the hostages is around 224. Gilad Shalit was one hostage for which Israel gave over 1,000 Hamas prisoners in Israel, over 1,024 to be exact. And so if you think about the math, 224,000 is a number that we don't even have. There are far less than that prisoners in Israel, and it's almost certain that if there will be a serious negotiation, something that unfortunately is not really happening, then Israel will have to release everyone that has ever been caught in Israel, including the bodies of several terrorists. And that's a situation that was 3 weeks ago almost unimaginable, and now is almost the opening bid for any serious negotiation. Just so you understand how, again, with that one item of knowledge, how serious the situation is that Yoav Gallant, the Minister of Defense, just agreed to meet for the first time tomorrow. So it's been 3 weeks with the delegates of the abducted and the hostages. So the situation is extremely dire in Israel. And I usually don't speak in that uncertain terms. I always try to find the silver lining. And there is the grassroots initiatives and amazing recruitment from everywhere in the country to help the soldiers. But I would suggest that the government is still in shock. The person heading the government, Bibi, is still in deep shock, and as a result, the Israelis are confounded, confused, and extremely frustrated. And I want to hear from you. How these 3 weeks have been, and if there's any solace or information that I can provide, I would be happy to. Sheila, did you want to start? No, I thought you said something. I'm sorry.
One of the people that they released was second in command operation from Hamas.
Who's they released?
Or one of
Who's they released?
Israel released for Shalit. When they released
Shalit. Oh yeah, that's a long time ago. That's water under the bridge.
One of the spearheads of it.
Of course. But
that's why you don't release any of them.
No, but now you'll have to release them all. Like there is.
No, I say you don't release.
So you kill all the hostages?
You really believe that they're all alive?
I definitely believe that we should unturned
We had no-
every
we had no
stone
proof
to
of
make
life
sure
on
that
any
they
of
are.
them.
We have no proof of life. Of course, he won't release anybody until you get full proofs of life, but that's not starting from we're not going to release them is not going to get us
I
there.
want something blue and white.
What?
Yeah.
Good Shabbos, good morning.
Shabbat shalom. They, according to at least one of them that was returned, an 85-year-old woman, they were treated very decently under, considering the situation. I'm not concerned about the proof of life. Correct. No, I'm not concerned.
I think you already said almost too much. We don't understand.
What 2 months? It's 3 weeks. It's been 3.
It sounded like it wasn't so bad, that she was treated well, So
No,
people say, you see, they're treated well, so why, like what you
There's
said,
multiple groups that have.
Why, what? Sorry, what? Just let her finish.
that if they're treated well, so we don't have to worry quite as much.
No, she was treated well. We have N equals 1. We have a sample of 1.
I don't believe that. I believe, publicly she'll say it was treated well. Privately, the authorities, it could be a totally different story on how she was.
Actually, in Israel, there is a huge brouhaha on the fact that you did tell the truth. That was not in line with what she was supposed to say. She was supposed to say that she was treated horribly. But she's 85 years old. I don't think she considers what she was supposed to say. But you guys really think that she's doing that kind of calculations when 1,400
Yeah,
Israelis were murdered, butchered, beheaded, raped, burned, and slaughtered to the ground because
because
she-
she's the hostages, she's a woman.
Also,
It's
a
different.
typical psychological reaction.
Okay.
The chemical,
So you think she got a Stockholm syndrome within a week? Okay, that's totally legitimate. Fine.
No,
That's what concerns you?
I don't think they're arguing that she's siding with, or she's sympathetic to Hamas. She has her own self-interest. She wants to protect her husband. So she's,
and the other hostages,
And by saying that she was treated well, she's protecting them?
yeah,
Okay, fine. If that's what bothers you, that's fine.
you don't really believe the Israelis believe her.
I believe her.
Yeah, no, I think they probably, it's amazing. They had doctors there that were helping them and whatever to after they beat them up but they, at least for her, they were more or less taking care of her.
So she says.
Well,
Right.
he says, yeah.
She's 85 years old.
Also want live people, otherwise, how many bodies can you return? People, if they know they're all dead bodies, they're not gonna run after them.
Nelson?
The bar is very low. Israelis, Americans, Jews expect Hamas to be Nazis. And so if they give her medicine and are kind in some tiny little ways, it's amazing. I just don't know. We don't have any standard.
But it
We have
didn't
no way of-
sway. Right, but it didn't sway any opinion. Nobody in Israel now thinks, Hamas is a righteous organization that treats people humanely. There was a second in the video that is
Her granddaughter.
louder than any words, where she turned around and shook the hand of her captain, and he was decidedly shocked, like he was all wrapped up with the Hamas insignia. It might be a woman thing. It's a mother thing.
And
It's
she is trying to show them, she understands it's not the individual soldiers, it's the leaders. And this is the way you can wear them down, you see?
You think she wore them down?
There are some Arabs, some Palestinians, and Syrians who are much more sympathetic to the Jews. They're not, I don't know if the word is sympathetic, they really wouldn't kill them or anything or harm them too much because they were treated by the Jews, by the Israelis in hospitals for various ailments, accidents, and whatnot. In fact, this syllable, I don't remember his name. We treated him like idiots. And he's come back to bite us. But some of them have expressed gratitude because, especially in the Syrian border and Gaza, the people came through. My granddaughter was in Tel Aviv when I guess it was the incidents before this, when they were taking people out of Gaza and transferring them into rehabs in Tel Aviv. And she was a high school kid, and she would help transfer them from one place to another. You know, she was a candy girl, a candy striper. And they were very grateful that they were being taken care of.
Any other things that concerns you? Yes, Nina.
Like to study Torah.
Okay. Anything else?
To pick up on what Sheila said, what would you say personally to people who tend to stereotype and make the assumption that all of these people who live in Gaza are monsters? What would you personally say to them? Are there human beings among them?
There are human beings among them.
Is it our obligation to kind of present that viewpoint?
Gaza currently has 2.3 million people. More than half of them were not alive in 2006 when the Hamas was elected into power. To claim that the Hamas represents them is problematic. Now, the other thing that is problematic is to try and divide an idea from people. So Israel went now out to war saying we have to eliminate the Hamas. The Hamas is an idea.
Yeah.
To eliminate an ideology is very problematic. But I really don't want to get into this. Is too much politics. I just do want to recognize the fact that there are a human being in Gaza. There are children who never done anything wrong to anybody.
Yeah.
Having said that, though, it's important to understand that that cannot and should not diminish from the horror and the level of cruelty and inhumanity that we suffered 3 weeks ago. The level of barbarism and hatred that was demonstrated by the Hamas terrorists that came through the border is something that really shocked everyone in Israel. We did not expect that level. We're not ready for that level. And that will be the last thing I would say, because I know Nina really wants to study Torah, is that although we will not escape, this thing is about Israel. So it's not like we will not forget about what's happening today. The head of international law in the IDF said that there is not a single war crime that both listed or mentioned anywhere that was not committed by the Hamas that day. And it's so funny that we're talking now about the bombings in Gaza and looking at Israel and about, proportionality and war crimes and all that. But the Hamas, since it's not a state entity, they're like, we can't put you on trial for war crimes. But it's important that you understand that whatever happened at Shabbat, there's not a single war crime, from genocide to mutilation of civilians, to rape, to burning alive, to killing kids in front of their parents in front of their kids. This horrible, horrible things. And not for naught, this is the first time in Israel that the word Shoah comes back to the conversation. Never before, in all our wars, Yom Kippur, 6 days, never the word Shoah entered the lexicon, because Shoah is something that is so unique and so standalone, sui generis. But this time, it's the idea that civilians were trapped in their own home, calling "Help me," and being burned alive, is something that really that Israel as a nation has not yet recovered from. And I don't know if there are psychologists here, how long it would take to Israel to recover. Yes.
Doron, can you put on your law professor hat and talk a little bit about this idea of the rule of law, the rules of law, because I don't think I can recall a time in any recent conflict, be it Myanmar, be it the fightings in Darfur and the Sudan, where the news media is bringing in experts to talk about the rule of law, and now Israel must follow the rules of law. I don't recall the rules of law being discussed when America was in Afghanistan or Iraq. I don't remember these experts being there. Suddenly, the rules of law must be completely followed, or else there is, a terrible tragedy occurring. So can you talk about what purpose that is, or whether those are even followed by anybody in that context?
Can I add a post?
Yes, please.
We should remember also Dresden in World War II,
Right.
Hiroshima and Nagasaki. If we're concerned about the citizens or the people of Gaza, we need to do that against the background of what we had to do to pursue World War II and the Japan to save our troops from going onto the island on Japan to defeat the country.
Let me start with that. And again, I promise we'll get in 2 minutes. It will be a very short answer. It is clear today that by today's standards of the Jus Gentium, the laws of war, the three things that you mentioned, the carpet bombing of Dresden post-war, or post the point that it was very clear that Dresden in itself does not present any real and immediate threat, as well as the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki are today war crimes. By today's standards, if Truman would authorize the bombing of two industrial, non-threatening cities such as Hiroshima and Nagasaki, that would put him in the chair for at least in the defendant's chair for war crimes. So yes, we didn't have some of the lessons of World War II was this idea of war crimes and putting even leaders in as subject of law. The issue of international law generally is very, very murky still. We have the ICC, the International Criminal Court, and some Yugoslavian, dictators were put there and sentenced to long periods in prison. But it's not clear that what is very clear is, yes, when Israel is even shooting one howitzer, then all of a sudden all the experts come because we have to withstand all those standards. It's not clear if anyone could or would ever enforce it, but the general principle, the only principle that matters is the principle of proportionality. And one could ask, what would the United States do if the Mexicans would, and it's hard to think about it that way. I'm not even bringing the Canadians because that's impossible. But if the Mexicans would go to San Diego and kill 33,000 people, because proportionally that's the number. 33,000 people, kids in front of their parents, parents in front of the kids, burning, raping, parading. It's the worst thing you can ever think about. Would the United States were like, laws of war, proportionality, interesting. We're not going to bomb, Guadalajara, whatever. Clearly not.
Might as well go in.
The wisdom, though, of doing that is different, because what are you going to do? Are you going to kill 2.3 million? Imagine there are no rules of war. There's no laws of war. There's no limitation whatsoever, which is more or less where the Israeli generals are now in terms of green light, like do whatever. Are you going to kill 2.3 million people? Would that help? Would that is that the Jewish way? Especially when, again, half of them are so young, they didn't even vote for the Hamas. I don't know. If I had answers, I would probably not sit here, have a much better perch, but I'm sitting here and telling you that I have zero answers. I have all the questions, but some in the Israeli Hanaga and the leadership don't have the courage to ask those questions. I will just say that President Biden, in what would forever will be one of the best speeches ever given, as far as the Israelis are concerned, they call him our new prime minister and all that. He did mention Afghanistan and did mention the fact that we should be cool-headed and not just enter to a 21-year war without clear thinking of an exit strategy and even on definition of a win, because it's not even clear what would, like 2.3 million people dead. Is that a victory? I don't know. So that's it. That's yes. not it. Sorry.
I'm hoping to take only 1 or 2 minutes. I want to talk about something that on the surface looks like an oxymoron, which is that in the Israeli society and among Israeli political analysts, a new concept was created. The translation of that concept from Hebrew to English is golden opportunity. How can you talk about the golden opportunity when there is such a catastrophe? Here's how. They're saying, it's not my thoughts, it's their thoughts, that now for the first time, the right conditions are being formed in order for that entity, remember, not the people, not Palestinians, or the entity, to be once for all, unlike all the previous time, to be done with, to be away with. Their infrastructure, their political power, and their military power especially. But that's only a small part of the whole picture. What needs to be done, everybody knows about it, easier said than done, is that we are talking about a triangle of powers, which is Hamas, and then Hezbollah, and then, of course, Iran. Iran is the perpetrator of the whole thing. He is what is now being famous as the head of the snake. And they're talking about the golden opportunity that not only now we have no choice but to destroy Hamas, the ideology not, it will remain, but also to destroy the root cause of terrorism in the entire Middle Eastern area, and by extension, also to Europe and to America, which is the West and the United States finally need to come to a conclusion that just like they did at the hands of the peanut president 43 years ago, the peanut president, we all know who it is, and they copied the previous regime, and now is also time again to do away with that regime.
Okay,
It's a matter of
thank you.
balance. So that's what it is.
And with that, we can start the portion of the week. 9:23. So if you can turn to page 69, today we're studying Lech Lecha. I usually don't get one of the three big ones, Bereshit, Noach, Lech Lecha. So if Bereshit was the beginning of the physical universe, the known universe to us, and Noach was the beginning of humanity. We had a false start, and then we hit refresh. Then Lech Lecha is the beginning of the Jewish people. Those three first portions are huge in that it's the beginning of the known universe, the physical universe. The second is the beginning of the humanity, and this idea that it can be a false start. Even God can have a false start, but more importantly, we as humans are not perfect. And now we're coming to the beginning of Judaism. Wow, that's early, yes.
Yeah. Well, I think it follows on. I think Lech Lecha not only is the beginning of Judaism, but it's God realizing that the whole world can't be good. Let's try one family.
All right. So if you turn to page 69, I want to read in Hebrew actually, and for a reason you'll understand in a second. Vayomer Adonai el Avram, his name at this point is Avram. Lech lecha me'artzecha u'mimoladetcha u'mibeit avicha el haaretz asher lecha. So go away from your land, your homeland, from your father's home. This three-time repetition resonates later when he's asked to take his son, his only son, the son that he liked, Isaac. So these are two separations that are so shocking that God wants to make us the reader, not that God doesn't understand that, but humans don't. And for me, those words always resonated because I've done that. I've done that 30 years ago. I left my homeland. I left my home. I left my dad's home. And I never understood it until my dad passed. I came back to Israel and I was like, where's Abba? Where's my dad? It's that's his home, right? And it's very hard. But although it's super elegant and the word is Lech Lecha, and we know that portion is Lech Lecha, we have to realize that as far as the text is concerned, and remember, these are pretty random or arbitrary, we have to go back to understand exactly where Avraham is. If you go back to page 61, Avraham is a dad. His name is Terach. If you go down to 119, Terach lived for 70 years. And then he had a baby called Avraham, and another baby called Nahor, and another baby called Haran. And for some reason, it is Terach, the dad, the patriarch, that decides to leave Aram Naharaim, Iraq of today, and to travel to Israel. It's clear, if you read on 62 verse 31, that it was Terach who made that decision without God, without Judaism, without any ideas. And he decides to take his Avraham Bno and Lot, who's the son of his brother, and Sarai. Again, the names are not yet fixed because they're not Jewish-ish yet or enough. And they all are going to Canaan. And it's clear where they're going. It's not clear why they're going. Clearly, Terach, the dad, never heard God's voices or followed some divine decree, but just moved around. And
You're making that assumption. We don't know that because there's nothing written.
correct. We don't know that. Exactly right.
He may have been called first.
By God.
Yeah.
And the text
It's
just
just
gleaned
not
over. The text just decided not to talk
Yeah,
about God.
There's a lot of stuff that's not in the text. That's
Right.
why we,
And
that's
so
why
we
we have midrashim.
And that's why we should assume that God talked to him because it's not in the text.
We can't assume that he didn't.
Maybe he talked to you this morning. All right.
We did.
Maybe it was for economic.
Okay, there's a lot of maybes. There are a lot of maybes. I want to teach today. There's a lot of maybes. There are a lot of things that are not here. But the point is, and that's the point I want to bring your attention, is that the Terach died. Well, Terach died, and when Terach died, when the patriarch died, Abraham is at a crossroad. And that's what I want to bring to your attention. Yud Bet, or Lech Lecha on 69 begins where Abraham is in a crossroad. His dad, not him, decided for him to go from Iraq, let's say, to Israel, and his dad died. And so at that point, Abraham is at a crossroad, both physically, but more importantly, mentally. What should he do now? And this is where Lech Lecha begins. I know. We all learned in fourth grade about the store and the gods and
That's Midrash also.
yeah, Midrash is amazing, but I'm not. I'll never make light of a Midrash. I'm just saying the text itself is way more profound than we give it. I think credence, and what we should do is read the text very carefully. The Lech Lecha, you should go, is where Abraham is looking for direction, both physically in the most, profound sense, like where should I go now, but also mentally and religiously. And this is where God says, when he says Bet Avicha, when he reminds me of the house of his dad, this is what Abraham is perhaps, and we don't know that, but perhaps tending to do, to go back home. His dad said, let's do this adventure. Let's do this commercial, not religious, commercial adventure. Let's move to America to build better lives for you and your sons. Okay? Israel is the fertile whatever, land of milk and honey. Let's move to America. But then dad dies. And it's not Continental or no, it's United, whatever, Airways within 12 hours. It's a long journey. It takes months and months and months. And it's very dangerous. I'm sorry?
They could have been attacked by highwaymen.
Yeah, there's a lot of robberies and there are natural risks as well, animals and cold and whatever. And so this is the time when God appears where Abraham needs it most. And I think that when we start with, again, in the fourth grade, when we teach it, when I studied it in the fourth grade, God just appeared in the dream to Abraham and say, Lech Lecha, and Abraham just went and walked. It's way more dramatic than that. Abraham was really on the fence, if you will, of what to do. And that's why those promises, I will make you a great nation, I will bless you, I will grow you there, and there shall be a blessing. All that is sort of a deal that requires Abraham to do something that otherwise he would not tend to do. And so this is how dramatic the opening is. So when we talk about the beginning of the known universe and the beginning of humanity, and then at the beginning of the Jewish people started when Abraham was on the fence, both physically and mentally, not knowing what to do. And then God appears to him and says all that. Now, the fact that God spoke to us 3,000 years later is self-explanatory. If he spoke, then we do, right? Not so the text. Look again at the text. Verse 4, Va'elech Avraham kasher diber elav Adonai. And it's your 71, or actually it's your 70 all the way in the bottom. Avraham went forth as the Lord has commanded him. Not a bad translation, actually. Went forth, meaning he agreed. He agreed with God. Now you could, I mean, you're like, Doron, are you an idiot? He's the father of our nation, right? Well, of course he did that. But it's everything but, of course. Gods were 5 a shekel at that day. God spoke to a lot of people all the time and told them all kinds of things like, tomorrow the sun will, rise in the west. We know that. We know the pagan tradition of the Middle East and how many gods were around. And so the God that tells you to do X, for you shall become Y in the future, not now. Usually the promises was, I'll get you an iPhone, but or something immediate. Usually, and when we hear that in Shema until today, if you hear what I said, you'll get the rain and it's time, and you'll harvest the fruit, and you'll see those concrete spoils, if you will, of religion. Not so with this promise. One day in the future, long after you'll die, you'll have a nation named after you, and all the people of the earth shall be blessed with you. Like, that's pretty fluid. I don't know, where's my money? Where's my Mercedes? Like, all this is good and well. And we'll get to that. We'll get to the Mercedes very clearly. No, I'm going alone in the home. I don't even have a son. What are you talking about? So it's not that Abraham was perfect. And I don't think Abraham was never portrayed as perfect. It, for me, is one of the most attractive thing about him, actually, not the flaws, if you will. And in that, again, I can't stress enough. Some people would tell you, some good people, good-hearted people will tell you that Christianity is some form of extension of Judaism or development of Judaism. Could not be more false. Jesus was perfect, and the notion of Jesus in and of itself is perfect. He's the Son of God. With Judaism, I know we're not at 25 yet, where he literally argues with God and tells him, I dare you. Shofet kol haaretz yaseh mishpat. The judge of the entire universe shall not do justice. But not long before that, Abraham is challenging God and is not sure what to do. And after God promises him to be a huge nation, it's like, I don't have one son. Where's the new nation thing? But before that, I just wanted to say that he listened to God and he decided to go to Israel. And so that is very, very, I think, transcendent moment in world's affair, where a single God spoke to a single person, like you said, a single family, maybe, I think a single person, and decided that this idea of monotheism, rather than this is a God and this is a God and stable is a God, but there's one God, and that God can affect my actions to a degree that I will actually move away from my homeland and move to Israel. But immediately, before we even, before that idea even dawns on us, I'm like, oh, he was such a Zionist. He was probably Israeli, probably maybe learns a bit of Hebrew. We have it 72:10. Like, boom, like it's just economics, guys. It's just, it's just the economy, stupid. Israel, this promised land of milk and honey, this America, the land of opportunity, disappointed. Didn't work as planned. Dad promised that, we just go to Israel, we'll pick up the gold off the floor, like we were told in Israel in the 60s about America. You go to San Francisco, there are gold coins on the, nobody ever told us that, but we were told that there was a gold rush and people went to California. And then Levi Strauss, a Jewish guy, created jeans, and that's pretty much America. He's the only one who really gained from the gold rush. What's cool about this for me, again, and looking at Abraham from the text, not the Midrashim and not this like larger than life entity that became the father of our nation, but more of a Washington kind of like he walked among us.
Well, there's nothing in the text that says he should stop when he gets to Canaan.
So when he got down to hunger, he went to Egypt without consulting God. I want to make this point abundantly clear, and I'll say it again. He went down to Egypt because he was hungry. He didn't consult God and said, hey, God, what's with all the great nation and promising to this and promising to that? And he went down to Egypt. Now, the Midrashim cannot contain that, obviously. And so in the Haggadah, every year we have to repeat that the word lagur sham, to dwell there, means temporarily. They're so like they have to. They can't just glance over this like how can you just walk away from the promised land, blah blah blah. And they're like lagur sham. Lagur sham means to dwell there. To me, as a reader, both 3,000 years ago and as today, there's nothing temporary about living there, but they made that point very abundantly clear. He didn't move to Egypt. He went to live there. And in the Haggadah, we learn to teach you that he only went to dwell there temporarily until there is enough abundance to come back to
I want
Israel.
to ask you about my Hebrew, lack of Hebrew, lagur,
To live.
to live. Okay.
Or to dwell. I don't know. How did they?
I'm looking at the word and
How
I'm
did they
saying
translate that in your book?
to be a stranger there. A
Right.
gear.
So,
Well, a ger is someone,
Well, it depends on which gear you're talking about.
well, but that,
I guess the text says lichiyot sham.
No, lagur sham. Lagur sham.
Exactly. So if it says lichiyot sham, then we can say, yeah, he went just to
Lichiyot is not a language that is used in the Tanakh.
Well, yes.
No.
I agree with you. I'm just saying that I'm confirming your thing that it says lagur sham. That
Well,
means temporary.
you don't need.
Yes.
That's in the text.
Confirm the idea. That,
Died.
Yes.
I-
Yeah.
Well, I'm translating as to be a stranger there.
No, to reside there. So, David, in your term, if I would move now to Canada to reside there, what would you think? I'm coming back in 5 years?
It's not absolutely clear.
Yes.
Right.
I could not agree with you more. It's not clear. But the Midrashim makes it every year. You read it in the Haggadah, lagur sham, like it's so like God forbid, he's not Zionist enough. But
We always say we have to treat the stranger properly, lager hagar.
yeah, you coming from there, but he was not a ger. He was not a ger there. And immediately, again, talking about moral perfectness, immediately he's concerned about one thing. What is the thing he's concerned about?
That somebody would kill him and.
Take his wife.
So he's concerned about the beauty of Sarai. Let me be very clear here. Again, we Abraham, the Holy One, the father, his wife was too beautiful. Now, to be clear, I'm not faulting him. Turns out that he was absolutely right. She was. But it's again, this whole, Abraham, transcendental, he's breaking out the idols. He was a very practical man. When he was hungry, he moved countries. When his wife was too beautiful, instead of covering her face or something, he said, tell them you're my sister. Now, again, this idea, you can always lie to the goy. You can always lie to the goy. The goy is not an equal to us. So it's not okay to lie to each other, but to the goy, you can always lie. I'm not sorry, I'm not in that school. If you can't lie, then you can't lie. Now, of course, there is this whole philosophical argument about hiding on the front in your cellar and then the Nazis are knocking on the door and Kant would say you can never lie because if you start here, blah, 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 and you end up with everybody lying. But of course, I'm not there. I was never a Kantian in this idea you can never lie. The question is, did he lie to save his life? And it turns that he did. He did, because that's exactly what happened. Everything that he claimed that would happen did happen. And it's nice that he tells that story to her. He says, if they'll see how beautiful you are, they will kill me and take you to the king, which teaches you a little bit about how good was the king back then. People were at the border, and if the women were too beautiful, they just kill the husband and send the wife to the king. And that's exactly what happened. A whole other side story, Nina, that I won't touch here is the beauty of the mothers. Like Sarai was just astonishingly gorgeous, and Rachel, 7 years, 14 years, and Rebecca, like people saw her and just fell on the ground. Just not sure what's the story there. We sing every Friday. I'm sorry.
He's doing it to save his life. I'm thinking, okay, it's saving his life, but they're still going to take Sarah, if he's a sister, and still give him to.
We'll soon. God protects her chastity. Don't worry, God protects her chastity.
To me, that's one of the things.
Not insulting and believing in God.
Could not agree more.
So he's.
God was not even in the picture. He didn't ask God permission or anything. But today we sing every Friday, Sheker Lachen ve'Hevel Hayofi, like the lie of the outside beauty as opposed to the inside beauty. But the Bible as a text just goes out of its way. She was so beautiful that his life was in danger, and it turns out that he was. But then God enters the picture. Thank you. If you don't. Yeah, but Leah was not the chosen one, right? He was not. He didn't love Leah. He didn't work for Leah 14 years. In fact, her eyes were soft, which can be translated in many ways. One of them was that she didn't see very well. But again, moving. Yeah, she wore glasses, contact lenses. Oh, glasses not pretty. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Yeah. No doubt that Leah was not pretty, but Leah was not the chosen one. He wanted Rachel. We were never.
We're all sitting here being Jews because we're theoretically all descended from Judah, who is Leah's son.
Of course. Yes. Okay, so the point is, how did that move turn Abraham to who he is? Because in return for his sister, he got a ton of he won the lottery, basically. If you turn to the bottom of 73:16, he got sheep and oxen and asses and asses and male and female slaves and she asses and camels. He became a millionaire because of that scheme. And then comes the question, whoa, what about Sarah? And it's all so good to get the lottery. Well, what about her? Then God's coming into the picture, but the Lord afflicted. It's not only the Lord, it's actually the actual name. So it's very interesting that Bereshit bara Elohim, if you look at AA, of course, it's Elohim. But when it comes to Abraham and Lech Lecha, the Lech Lecha Elohim is the actual name. They translate it as the Lord. I'm not sure how is the right way to translate that, but it's the actual name.
Hashem.
Well, Hashem, whatever. So Hashem is the one.
Chapter 2 says the four letter.
Yeah, but for me, who's it's not Elohim. It's not just the general God. It's the Jewish God who appeared and made Pharaoh afflicted with all those things. Now, to me, what's the most shocking thing is the next line is 18. Let's read 18 carefully. Pharaoh then said,
something. How long? This is not very clear. How long was Sarai with the Pharaoh? I mean,
not one night. That is, I'm with him in 13 on that. Here, one night.
Land and moving here.
Not land, property. Yeah, because he moved that to Israel. That's why I know it's not land.
Literally.
Wait, I mean, here, we're not overtake. So Sarah must have been with the Pharaoh.
First of all, you can have the deal struck such that first I get the lottery, then you get the wife. Number one. Number two, if you remember Megillat Esther, and I'm sure you do, they prepare them for 6 months to see the king, for 6 months. Because a woman cannot be taken from the street, quote unquote, and be with the king. She needs to be passed with myrrh and stuff for 6 months to be prepared for the king. So I'm totally with the Parshanim here, 100%. He never touched her. He never laid a hand on her. She is as pure as gold. But to me, again, 18 is so cardinal, and that is not in the
It also doesn't.
in the Haggadah for some unknown reason. 18 is key. Here's what happens after Pharaoh was afflicted with huge plagues and stuff. 18 reads, Pharaoh then sent for Abraham, and I would think that the next word would be, and he killed him. But the next words are, and what is this you have done to me? Why did you not tell me that it was your wife?
And where's the
Why did you
contrast
say
that
she
found
is
out?
my sister, so that I took her as my wife? Now, here is your wife, take her and be gone. Kach velech. Kach velech. I want to say something about kach velech with some of my, it appears again in the Bible, take it and leave. 2010, 13 years ago, bar mitzvah years ago, I moved here, and a very nice rabbi by the name of Rona asked me to come and teach Torah here. And I told her, I don't have a book. And she said, Kach velech. Said, take one and leave. So every time, this book belongs to this shul. I just want to, but I'm it's totally marked down. But she said, you have to have a book if you want to teach here. You have to have the same book that the community has. And so this is the book. And so here's your wife, Kach velech. And he's not at all. He's not killing him. There's no vengeance. He's not even returning the property, which for me was like, wait a second, that's a contract. You give this sister, I'm giving you the property. No, just leave me alone. And that's a very not typical kingly response. That's not the royal response. I would expect one of three things. Either he would kill him, or he would return all the things, or he will just throw him in jail like they did to Joseph many years later. But no, none of the above. You want it all. I didn't lay a finger on your wife. And how can he connect the fact that he got skin afflictions with the fact that she's not the sister? Like, how did that even jive together? He must recognize in a way, again, Mefarshim, that there is a higher force here that walks with Abraham but doesn't walk with Pharaoh. Pharaoh is like, the president of the United States. It's like the greatest king in the area. So this is, for me, 18 is one of the most defining verses that says God was not only recognized and seen by Abraham, but his actions were recognized by others, to the extent that Pharaoh, the greatest king in the area, did not lay a finger on him, not on the Sarai, did not kill him, did not throw him in jail, did not even ask for the property back. Kach velech. Just get away from me. Nina, did you want to say something? I thought I saw you.
Yeah. First of all, it's interesting that they don't go give any explanation what the plagues were.
No, they
I
don't.
find that interesting.
And enough that he would just get away from me. Yeah.
And I think I'd forgotten that this is not with Pharaoh in Egypt. Much later on in the Torah, that's when all the description, the 10 plagues, I didn't realize they actually used the word plague.
Yes.
In Lech Lecha. So that's interesting. And then he's asking Abraham, are we to assume Abraham's standing there? And he's actually asking him personally, why didn't you tell me this is your wife? Why did you say,
it was your
she
sister?
was your sister? And there's no answer, you notice.
Yeah, there's no answer, but it's clear. I think it's clear that that was the law of the land. Like if it's the wife, then you just get killed. And I think that the king realizes that, but he doesn't like to be fooled. He doesn't like to be cheated by some commoner from Israel.
Later on, when the same story repeats with the Philistine king.
Correct.
It's
Yeah.
much more detailed.
Avimelech Melech Gal. Yeah.
Avram, or maybe it's Abraham by that.
It is Avram. Yeah.
Is saying
Sarai.
an answer, giving an answer. Here he's it's as if he's mute. He's just standing there and being told what to do. What he's being told to do is okay, take the stuff and your wife and get out. So now he he had a good business deal in Egypt, if you will. But it doesn't, there are no words in his mouth yet. There are in the second story. That's another interesting difference.
I'm not sure that I agree with any of you. I think that no, it's very good reading, but Pharaoh finishes his speech, quote unquote, not with a question mark, but with an exclamation point. Here's your wife. Like, shut up. Like every good attorney would tell him, great, shut up. Just get up and leave. You're done here. Our job is done here. Don't even open your mouth, because whatever you're gonna say is gonna be worse. And things could change their minds, you know. So, but
Just for a little historical context, I'm not really sure in this case. I know that the Pharaoh and
when you start with historical context, I'm start trembling because I have no idea what you're going to say.
it's out there anyway, and it could be wrong because I obviously haven't looked this up in advance, and I'm not sure of my dates before the Pharaoh of in Exodus. But the Pharaoh in Exodus is a new kingdom Pharaoh.
Of course.
The Hyksos Pharaoh, in other words, the second intermediate period in Egypt. I don't know.
I don't know. I think answer that. It's clear that the name
That could partially explain this from the perspective that those pharaohs were essentially also from the same part of the world that Abraham is coming from, and they had set themselves up in Egypt during a period of weakness in the native hierarchy, so to speak.
I understand that the name Pharaoh did follow the king. So, but it's clear that it's not the same person that Abraham stood in front of and the Moshe stood in front of. It's 400 years between them. But
I mean, it makes it a little mundane, which I guess is not what we're trying to do.
Correct.
It kind of explains why this is different than the later interactions with somebody called Pharaoh.
okay, yes, Drew.
You're talking about Abraham. It is probably the same story, but the different author, the JEPD.
Well, I can't hear you. I'm done.
Look at what name they use for God, and you'll know if it's different.
Different author.
In other words, this is another version,
Yeah.
another editor.
Another version of what?
JEPD, don't you?
Yeah, but another version of what?
Of this story.
She's wondering if the redactors, there was this story, there was that story of him meeting the king, and then they just put them both in here.
What two stories? I'm lost. What
The other king,
Where the Philistine king takes.
Abimelech Melech Gal?
Yeah,
No, it's the two different stories.
but they play out somewhat differently, which is what I was
Yes.
before, but they're similar stories in a way, because it's a king who wants.
Everything. I think if the second one teaches us on the first is how reasonable his decision was. Very lucky, but very reasonable because it's this or death. But I want to move forward because there's one thing I want to teach you today that some of you would not like Bijou, but otherwise that's the text. So I'm protected by the text. So now we're starting at 13. He comes back from Egypt after winning the lottery. Him and his wife.
What's the famine over?
Him and his wife and all his new property went back to the Negev. And Abraham is very heavy in terms of property and gold and silver. This is the beginning of 13. And that's amazing because he went chasar kol. He went with nothing. He came back a millionaire, which is just shows how shrewd he was. And later on, we'll see that in Ma'arat HaMachpelah, in the story of how he negotiated for a burial for his wife. And he recognizes that probably there is something there beyond his business acumen. And so he builds a shrine to God and he calls him God and everything is good. But now the one lesson that I want to teach you today in exactly 4 minutes is what happens when there is a geographical dispute between two brothers on the same land that happens to be 3,000 years later replaying itself in the exact same way. So Gamlot is the son of his brother. He also had cattle and he also had tents, meaning maybe he was not Elon Musk kind of rich, but he was very wealthy too. And then look at verse 6. I wonder how they translated it. Verse 6 is on your page 75. So that the land could not support them staying together, could not sustain rather than support. Like they couldn't. This town is too small for us, is basically what what Gary Cooper told his brother-in-law, 3,000 years ago. This town is too small for the both of us. And they kept fighting, and his cattle herders fought with his cattle herders and all the time. And then look how Abraham solves this. This is so radical that no one today would even propose that. That's how radical it is. It's way more radical than that. Again, Abraham resolved this without consulting God, without asking God for permission, without even suggesting that God is involved in any way. Abraham said to Lot, without God being involved, let there be no strife between you and me, between my herdsmen and your herdsmen, for we are kinsmen. Anachnu achim, we're brothers. And again, when you look at today's conflict over the state of Israel, we are brothers. Is not the whole land before you? Let us separate. And that's, if you hear today from Biden down, all the advisors, we must separate. We must separate. We can't live together. So let us separate. But how do we separate? And when that principle is known in economics as you cut, I choose. So if you see two kids fighting over a cake, that solution is viable 3,000 years ago in property dispute and today in peace negotiations. You cut, I choose. So that means that the little kid cuts the cake, always one side is larger, that's physics. And then the other one chooses. So you better cut it very, very gingerly. So what does he say? Is it not the whole land before you? Let us separate. If you go north, I'll go south. And if you go south, I'll go north. That's not the translation. The actual text is, not north and south, but left and right. And it's very, very important because
Why is it translated it that way then?
Yeah.
Yeah, I always thought.
it's above my pay grade. Why I don't know if they don't speak Hebrew or what, but not only that, if you consider the geographic explanation that he looked to Sodom, that's exactly where they are in terms of left and right, not north and south.
Right.
Yeah, east and west. But well, it depends what if they were facing this way or that way. But my point is that Abraham was a very practical man. And when the land dispute arose, he said, you choose, you cut, I'll choose. And then that's what happened. Lot saw Sodom and Gomorrah, and he saw the entire Jordan Valley that was extremely fertile. And you have to remember that fertile in those days, if people moved countries because there was hunger, then fertile is it's the only reason to have a land, especially in a dry country like Israel. And the text here puts an amazing footnote. Like the second footnote, the one is in chapter A, and here's the second footnote. That all happened before God literally destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. Why is that? So the reader would look and say, how could he choose Sodom and Gomorrah? I mean, it's the dumbest choice ever. And the text reminds us, lest we forget, that was before God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. And so he chose that. And Lot says, I will go with this fertile state of land. And Lot went there, and Abraham stayed in the land of Canaan. And then God comes to Abraham and validate the choice. This is a very important part that is not highlighted by our interpreter. The interpreter wants to say that Abraham always followed God's advice. But in real life, he went to Egypt without consulting God. He gave up his wife without consulting God. He decided to separate the country without consulting with God. But once he done all that, then God comes into the picture in 14, and it says, and the Lord spoke to Abraham after Lot separated from him and said, raise your eyes and look, and those famous words, this is the bris that we all are aware, and we're going to celebrate in a few moments. In the sanctuary, this is the famous bris that we were given the entire country. But when right-wingers today use this term, the entire country, from sea to shining sea, blah, blah, please read the text. You don't have to correct them because they're messianic. They will never be corrected. But this is after Abraham realized that two nations cannot live in the same plot of land. And it said, let us separate. Just choose whatever you want, but leave me alone. Let us separate in peace. And that's exactly what happened. Then, and only then, God comes and says, all this is yours. This being limited, not this being, the entire Fertile Crescent. And with that, I bid you Shabbat Shalom.